Welcome to Entertainment Tonight. Ottawa-born rapper MC Gregory, most noted for his lyrics and performances on stage, has recently come into the environmental community's sights as being one of the leading environmentalists in the country. He has recently given $50 million to help remote northern communities start to establish long-term renewable energy projects. And we are lucky enough to have him here in studio with us today. Hello Gregory, how are you?
Yo, MCG, what up? Thanks for having me.
So MC Gregory, tell me, why did you decide to give so much of your wealth towards an issue like this?
The issue at hand is the fact that there are 300 remote northern communities in Canada that are completely dependent upon diesel for all of their electricity needs because of the fact that they do not have any access to any renewable resource projects because of how expensive they are. These communities in the north are extremely poor and they don't have the funds to allocate to making some of these renewable resource projects a reality. Now, one of the biggest factors that we need to consider is that diesel is an extremely toxic substance and extremely harmful for the environment. These remote communities use approximately 215 million liters of diesel every year as a result of this diesel dependence, and this causes 600 kilotons of CO2 emissions to exit and go into the atmosphere, contributing to the number of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere and contributing to climate change. Now, while we are feeling the effects of climate change down here in Ottawa and elsewhere, these communities in the north are feeling the effects far greater in terms of the migration of hunting animals as well as the loss of sea ice and the change in temperature. Now, one of the big factors to consider is the fact that diesel is often used with these old diesel generators that are often 30 to 40 years old. The problem with these diesel generators is the fact that not only are they very old, but they often break down, leaving these communities without electricity for days at a time. As well, because these diesel generators are so old, they have a massive amount of money that is taken to make sure that they are maintained and to make sure that overhead costs are maintained. These diesel generators often leak into the environment, causing environmental hazards as well as community hazards for the health and safety of the people that are living in these communities. As well, diesel is unbelievably expensive and requires it to be transported by tanker up the east coast of Canada or along dangerous ice roads. Oftentimes, these tankers or trucks will be delayed because of the fact that they are determined by the amount of ice and the weather conditions. And sometimes these communities will not receive the diesel that they need in order to generate the electricity that keeps them alive. Diesel is very, very expensive, and oftentimes these poor communities are spending everything they have just to be able to get it, even after it has been heavily subsidized by the Canadian government. The communities do not have any other funds to put towards renewable projects, let alone feasibility assessments or environmental evaluations to see if these renewable projects can be implemented. As a result of these debt caps that are imposed upon them, they are unable to create a sustainable working economy. Our goal as environmentalists should be to turn these local economies towards renewable resource projects that make sure that they have long-term sustainable change that will ensure that more money is put back into the community for social programs and put towards helping the local environment.
So what are some of the reasons that affirmative action hasn't been taken to help some of these remote northern communities, considering that the problem seems to be so grave?
There are several reasons why the government hasn't been able to take affirmative action towards helping these remote northern communities. One of the biggest issues is the fact that there is a huge lack of awareness as to the problem with these communities being forced to depend upon diesel. Many of the government legislation and government acts that have been imposed have been as a result of public push and social movements that have forced the government's hand and forced them to recognize that there is a change that has to happen. By making sure that the public is more aware about this issue, we can start to push the government towards finding renewable solutions and finding solutions that enable these communities to help pay for these projects without putting them in extreme amounts of debt. Another reason the government hasn't taken strong affirmative action towards these northern remote communities is the fact that they have actually given a lot of money for renewable projects throughout the country and have given plenty of funding towards feasibility assessments, environmental evaluations, and, in many cases, the actual implementation and construction of solar, wind, geothermal, and hydroelectric projects. Unfortunately, the grand majority of all of this funding has gone to provinces that are in the south, and these provinces generally have the funding to actually go ahead and build these large renewable resource projects. Many of the funding that they allocate is simply towards smaller communities that need help with assessments and evaluations, or if the implementation of such a renewable resource project is still under, let's say, $90,000 to $100,000, the Government of Canada, through their various programs such as Eco-Energy, is willing to allocate those funds in order to make that a reality. But unfortunately, many of the projects that need to be implemented in these northern communities require millions of dollars in order to see substantial change. A lot of the communities that are up there, some of them do have very small solar or wind turbine installations next to their diesel generators, but these are only there in the event of a generator breaking down or having some kind of leak or spill. They're not there to completely eradicate the dependence on diesel. It is only in a worst case scenario. For a large scale renewable resource project to have significant change will require millions of dollars in government funding. Now, in the long run, you will see a significant return on investment. These people will be able to keep significantly more money, put that money towards the environment, put that money towards social programs, and you'll see that the government will actually save money because they won't be subsidizing so much. But you need to put in a lot in order to get a lot back. And unfortunately, they are still tied up with providing small funding for small projects that are in the south, and they still have not turned their attention or their focus towards these northern communities and providing significant funding. There is a massive need for an alternative to this kind of problem. Now, that does require that we create more renewable resource projects in the north, such as wind, solar, and hydroelectric, but it's not merely creating more sustainable economic choices. It depends upon how we can restructure the financial allocation of funds for these kinds of projects in the future. Because as it stands, the government refuses to move forward on these projects that are extremely expensive. They refuse to move forward unless there is a complete avoided cost option of diesel. Now, the problem with this is the fact that they are not taking into account several different factors. One of the factors that they're not taking into account is that they're not taking into account the capital, operational and maintenance, and the overhead costs of diesel and of maintaining these diesel generators. There's a lot more to it beyond the fact of simply buying diesel and simply purchasing solar or wind energy. Unfortunately, the government does not realize that, and whenever they are conducting their reports and their committees are overseeing whether or not to allocate certain funds to a particular project in the north, many times, most times out of 100, they will refuse to do it because of the fact that it does not have a specific avoided cost of replacing diesel with wind or solar. This is the wrong kind of approach. We need to factor in that these renewable resource projects that we'll be implementing are not merely moving away from the cost of the expensive diesel. What they're doing is that not only are we not using a harmful substance, we're no longer having to use the overhead costs, the operation and maintenance costs, maintaining these generators, making sure that we are cleaning up any spills or leaks that cause environmental damage, that cause damage to people's health, that cause damage to the community, all of which require the government and taxpayers to pay more money. In the end, these communities and taxpayers will save significantly more money because of the fact that we are not putting so much money towards maintaining and operating these heavy and dirty machines. Another factor that comes into play when thinking about the financial system is the fact that it does not take into the true value of switching from diesel dependence to a healthy green alternative. The reason for this is the fact that we are not understanding the environment as being intrinsic in its own right. At this point, we are simply seeing it from an instrumental perspective, and this is the wrong kind of approach. We need to change the way that we think. In your new song, Sustainable is Attainable, we actually see the influence from your environmental beliefs in your writing, and I believe that we have a clip that we can play right here.
These aren't alternate facts, it's an alternate act. We need to be holistic. The environment is intrinsic. Fossil fuels are cruel on nature. Take a look and it's sadistic, but remain optimistic. The solution is simplistic. Sustainable is attainable. Well, let me be specific. More funding for renewable resources. Hydroelectric from water courses. Wind power from aeolian forces. Diesel generators are getting old and they're breaking down and they'll leave you cold. These are pollution causing untold damage to what we hold dear. Our fears that without intervention, the changing of our skewed perception, we cannot move in a new direction. Financial allocation needs to change. Investing in sustainable ways and helping remote communities with evaluating feasibility. Wow. Powerful and captivating. You've really done it this time. Are there any last words that you have for our viewers before we sign off? If I have any last words for the audience today, it's the fact that we need to change the financial structure by which we allocate funds to these renewable projects. And we need to make sure that the public is aware of this so that public perception of these northern remote communities changes so that more social movement can help push the government to make substantial change. As it stands, we continue to think that the environment is simply an instrumental tool for us, when we have to understand that the environment is intrinsic in its own right. It has its own rights that need to be respected. We need to change how we see these renewable resource projects and how we see the cost of implementing them. Until we understand that we cannot simply look at the bottom line avoided cost of changing from diesel to wind, solar, or hydroelectric, that we have to evaluate the fact that we will no longer be paying for the overhead and management and operating costs of these dirty old diesel generators, and that we will be receiving clean, sustainable energy. We have to understand that that deserves a little bit of effort and deserves investment in order to see substantial results, not only for the environment, for the poor people that live in that community that cannot afford to make that kind of change, that have still been fighting for that kind of change for years, that have been not taken seriously by the government because of the fact that these projects require initial capital. But until we understand that that initial capital is dwarfed by the psychological benefits of the environment on the human psyche, by the benefits to the environment to help stop climate change, and to helping these communities create sustainable local governments and local economies that will be able to put more money into social programs and back into the community and into environmental programs, that we will see a long-term effect and long-term benefit from these projects. It is very important that we change our perception in order to change the government's perception as well. I cannot simply do this alone. I need every single person to take a minute and understand that the environment is important, but it will never be fixed unless we put in time and we invest in long-term solutions. Well, that's all the time we have on entertainment tonight. MC Gregory, thank you so much for coming in and speaking with us. His new song will be dropping soon. You can follow him on social media for the release date, as well as to sign his petition for financial restructuring for the allocation of funds for renewable energy projects. Thank you so much and have a great evening, guys. That's good, I like that.